Encrypted memories, Dahlia Reeves surveyed San Francisco's skyline from her corner office, watching fog roll between glass towers like digital clouds. The view from the 37th floor of Cipher Technologies headquarters never failed to remind her how far she'd come. At 35, she'd built a cybersecurity empire from scraps of code and determination, becoming the woman whose software protected governments and corporations alike. "The demo for the Pentagon is ready," said a voice from the doorway. Dahlia turned to see Ethan Novak, her chief technology officer, leaning against the frame. Tall, with thoughtful hazel eyes and perpetually tousled dark hair, Ethan had been with her since before Cipher was anything but an idea scribbled on cafe napkins. "Any issues with the neural encryption?" she asked, straightening the sleeves of her tailored navy suit. "None. It's bulletproof, just like you designed it." His smile carried warmth that contrasted with the office's minimalist chill. Dahlia nodded, her expression remaining neutral despite the small flutter of pride. Project Blackout was set to revolutionize data security, unhackable encryption that would make Cipher the undisputed leader in cybersecurity. After 7 years of development, they were days away from unveiling it to the world. The team wants to celebrate tonight. "Pre-launch drinks at Vapor," Ethan said, crossing the room to stand beside her at the window. "You should come." "I have the investor deck to finish," she replied automatically. Ethan sighed. "Dahlia, they worked 18-hour days for months. Your presence would mean something." She met his gaze, noting the faint lines at the corners of his eyes, evidence of the countless late nights they'd shared perfecting code. At 38, Ethan had sacrificed as much as she had for Cipher, turning down prestigious offers from tech giants to stay by her side. The difference was he still remembered how to be human. "1 hour," she conceded. "After I finish the financials." His smile broadened. "I'll send a car at 8. As he turned to leave, Dahlia found herself watching the confident set of his shoulders, the way his presence seemed to warm the sterile office long after he'd gone. Their relationship existed in a carefully maintained professional space, boundaries she'd established, and he respected. But occasionally, like now, she caught herself wondering what might exist beyond that line. Her phone buzzed with an alert from building security. A courier had delivered a package requiring her signature. Odd. She wasn't expecting anything. When the package arrived, it was a simple manila envelope with no return address, just Dahlia Reeves typed on a label. She dismissed her assistant and sliced it open with a letter opener. Inside was a flash, drive, and a handwritten note on expensive stationery. "Before blackout launches, remember who you really are." Dahlia's fingers went cold. She glanced toward her door, confirming it was closed before inserting the drive into her computer. A single video file appeared, footage from a juvenile detention center's security camera, dated 15 years ago. A thin girl with fierce eyes sat across from a social worker, her wrists handcuffed to the table. Dahlia quickly ejected the drive, her heart hammering against her ribs. She hadn't seen that footage in years, had paid considerable sums to ensure it remained buried. Someone knew. Someone had found Jessa Markham, the teenage hacker who disappeared into the system after serving 18 months for crashing the servers of a multinational banking system. Someone knew that before Dahlia Reeves existed, there had been Jessa, angry, brilliant, and dangerous. And whoever it was, they were threatening to reveal everything just days before the most important moment of her career. Digital ghosts. The Vapor Lounge hummed with celebration as Cipher's engineering team toasted their impending success. Blue light bathed the upscale bar, turning cocktails into luminescent potions and casting shadows across animated faces. In the corner, Dahlia maintained her composure behind a glass of sparkling water, her smile practiced and eyes vigilant. "To unhackable encryption and the woman who made it possible," announced Julian West, Cipher's head of product marketing, raising his glass toward Dahlia. The team erupted in cheers, their faces bright with admiration. Dahlia nodded graciously, though her thoughts remained locked on the flash drive now secured in the hidden safe behind her office bookshelf. For 7 years, she'd maintained the perfect facade, brilliant, composed, untouchable Dahlia Reeves with degrees from MIT and Stanford. The carefully constructed identity had no cracks, no vulnerabilities, until now. "You've barely touched your water," Ethan observed quietly, appearing at her side. "And you've checked your watch 4 times in the last 10 minutes. The investor presentation is already perfect," he finished. "What's really bothering you?" For a moment, she considered. Telling him everything. Ethan had been her constant, the one person who'd never questioned her reticence about her past, who'd respected her boundaries while somehow remaining steadfastly present. But revealing the truth would change how he saw her. It would change everything. "Just pre-launch jitters," she lied smoothly. 17 government contracts hinging on one presentation tends to have that effect. His eyes lingered on hers a moment too long, and she knew he didn't believe her. Nevertheless, he nodded. "I'll have the car brought around." Back in her penthouse apartment, Dahlia paced barefoot across polished concrete floors. Floor to ceiling, windows reflected her image like a digital ghost against the backdrop of city lights. Who had sent the footage? Who else knew about Jessa Markham? She'd been meticulous in erasing that identity, changing her name legally after aging out of the system, using her scholarship money to alter official records, building her reputation from scratch. The juvenile records should have been sealed, the footage inaccessible. Her secure phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "A name change doesn't erase who you are underneath. The world deserves to know the truth about Cypher's founder." Dahlia's fingers tightened around the device. This wasn't just about exposing her past. This was timed to destroy Blackout's launch. If potential clients discovered their unhackable encryption had been designed by someone with a juvenile record for hacking, they'd question everything. She pulled up the security footage from Cypher's lobby, scrolling back to when the package had been delivered. The courier wore a standard uniform, face partially obscured by a cap. Nothing unusual, except that she couldn't trace the delivery service logo on his jacket to any legitimate company. Another text arrived. "What would your precious Ethan think? If he knew you'd built your empire on lies?" Cold fear gripped her chest. This wasn't random. Whoever was behind this knew about Ethan, understood his importance to her. They had been watching. Dahlia accessed Cypher's secure server remotely, initiating a deep background check protocol she'd developed but never used, one that would scan the darknet for any mention of Jessa Markham or connections to her current identity. It would take hours to compile results, but it was her only lead. Dawn found her still awake, reviewing every employee file, every contractor who'd ever worked for Cypher, someone with access, someone with a grudge, but nothing stood out. Cypher's culture was notoriously positive. She'd ensured it, knowing firsthand how toxic environments bred resentment. Her phone rang at 6:07 a.m. Ethan. "There's something you need to see," he said, his voice tense. "Someone's been in the system." Dahlia's blood went cold. "What did they access?" "Nothing critical, just your personal files, employee records. The intrusion was sophisticated, bypassed our standard protocols. I only caught it because I was running a pre-launch security sweep." She closed her eyes. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. "Dahlia," Ethan hesitated. "There's something else." They left a message embedded in the code. It says, "Ask her about Redwood Juvenile Detention Center." The silence stretched between them, miles of unspoken questions. "I'm on my way," she finally said, ending the call. In the bathroom mirror, Dahlia studied her reflection. The perfectly styled copper hair, the emerald eyes that revealed nothing. Beneath designer clothes and executive poise lived the ghost of a girl who had once channeled her rage into destructive brilliance, a girl who had sworn never to be powerless again. Someone wanted that girl to resurface. Someone wanted Jessa Markham to destroy everything Dahlia Reeves had built. As she dressed for battle in a charcoal suit and crimson blouse, Dahlia made a decision. She would not run from this ghost. This time, she would face it, before it took away the one person whose opinion of her actually mattered. Firewall Breach Cypher's headquarters buzzed with pre-launch energy when Dahlia arrived, but she moved through it like a specter, acknowledging greetings with automated responses while her mind raced through contingency plans. The company's central security hub, nicknamed the Vault, was a glass-walled room at the heart of their operations floor, where their most sensitive work occurred. Ethan waited inside, his expression grave as he worked across 3 monitors. He'd clearly been there all night. His usual crisp appearance had given way to rolled sleeves and stubbled jawline. Despite everything, Dahlia felt that familiar, unwelcome warmth at the sight of him. His dedication, his brilliance, his unwavering loyalty. "Show me," she said, closing the door behind her. The intrusion was elegant, Ethan explained, bringing up scrolling lines of code. Almost artistic. They weren't trying to steal Blackout's algorithms or sabotage the launch. They were leaving breadcrumbs. He pulled up a series of timestamps. They accessed your employee file first, then the original business registration documents. Then this. He pointed to an apparent search for Markham across all Cypher databases. "What did they find?" Dahlia asked, her voice carefully controlled. "Nothing. There are no instances of that name in our system." Ethan swiveled his chair to face her directly. "But I ran my own search. Jessa Markham was a minor arrested for a sophisticated cyber attack on First Western Financial in 2010. She served 18 months at Redwood Juvenile Detention and then disappeared from all records." Their eyes met, and Dahlia saw no judgment in his only questions. "Is someone trying to connect you to this person?" he asked quietly. Before she could answer, her private phone chimed with another message. "Time's running out. Tell him or I will. Press conference tomorrow." Dahlia's composure finally cracked. Her hand trembled as she set the phone down. "I need to show you something," she said, her voice barely audible. She pulled out the flash drive from her pocket. "This arrived yesterday." As the footage played, Ethan watched the teenage girl in handcuffs, rail-thin with defiant eyes and dark hair cropped short. Even across 15 years, the intensity in those eyes was unmistakable. "That's you," he said simply. Not a question. Dahlia nodded once, her throat tight. "Jessa Markham, orphaned at 11, bounced through 7 foster homes in 4 years. The last one..." She paused, steadying herself. "The foster father was embezzling from his company. I discovered it when I hacked his computer looking for leverage to make him stop." She stopped abruptly. "Stop what?" Ethan's voice was gentle but insistent. "It doesn't matter now. What matters is, I found evidence of his crimes and threatened to expose him. He turned me in for accessing his work computer without permission. When they investigated further, they found other intrusions I'd made, including into First Western, where I'd discovered predatory lending practices targeting low-income neighborhoods like mine." Ethan listened silently as she continued. "After Redwood, I was placed with a decent family until I aged out. Got a scholarship to MIT, changed my name legally to Dahlia Reeves, created a new identity, a new life." Her eyes met his. "Everything I've built with Cypher is legitimate, Ethan. Every innovation, every contract, but my background, the official story, isn't." "Why are you telling me this now?" She handed him her phone with the threatening messages. "Someone knows. They're threatening to expose everything before the Blackout launch. They specifically mentioned you." Understanding dawned in his eyes. They're using me to pressure you. They know you matter to me, she admitted, the words feeling like a confession of weakness. The silence between them stretched, filled with the weight of years of unspoken feelings. Finally, Ethan stood, running a hand through his already disheveled hair. We have 24 hours until the press conference. We need to find out who's behind this and stop them. His voice held no hesitation, no judgment, only determination. You're not, Dahlia faltered. You don't want to distance yourself from this? From me? Your reputation is tied to yours by choice, he finished firmly. I've worked beside you for 7 years, Dahlia. I've seen your integrity, your brilliance, your vision. Nothing in that footage changes who you are to me. Something cracked in Dahlia's carefully maintained facade. For the first time in years, she felt tears threatening. She blinked them back, unwilling to surrender control even now. I need to make some calls, she said, turning away to hide the emotion in her eyes. Former connections who might know who's tracking Jessa Markham. Ethan caught her arm gently. You don't have to do this alone anymore. His eyes held hers. You never did. In that moment, Dahlia realized her greatest vulnerability had never been her past. It had been her refusal to trust anyone with it, especially the man who had earned that trust 1,000 times over. System recovery rain lashed against the windows of Dahlia's office as night descended over San Francisco. The engineering team had been sent home early, told to rest before tomorrow's launch. Only she and Ethan remained, surrounded by holographic displays of data, digital breadcrumbs they'd been following for hours. The intrusion originated from a VPN service that specializes in anonymity, Ethan said, pushing away from his keyboard with frustration. Professional work. Dahlia nodded, unsurprised. Whoever's behind this has resources. They had spent the day tracing leads, reaching out to contacts from Dahlia's carefully maintained network of reformed hackers and security specialists. No one had heard whispers about Jessa Markham or any planned expose on Cypher's founder. What about former Redwood staff? Anyone who might have had access to that footage? Ethan suggested, loosening his tie as he paced the room. Most wouldn't connect Jessa to Dahlia. The physical transformation was... She gestured vaguely to herself. The scared, skinny girl with cropped dark hair had disappeared beneath copper. Waves, tailored clothing, and years of practiced poise. Deliberate. Someone made the connection, Ethan pointed out. Someone with both the old footage and knowledge of your current life. Dahlia closed her eyes, mentally sorting through possibilities. There was one person, a counselor at Redwood, Vanessa Harlow. She recognized my potential, argued for leniency in my sentencing. She even helped me apply for scholarships after my release. Could she be behind this? She was the closest thing to a mentor I ever had. She believed in second chances. Dahlia shook her head. But we lost touch years ago after I changed my name. Ethan pulled up a search terminal. Vanessa Harlow, former counselor at Redwood Juvenile Detention. The results showed a LinkedIn profile. Vanessa had become the director of a non-profit helping former juvenile offenders reintegrate into society. Her organization, Phoenix Rising, specialized in tech education and career placement. Her work, email is listed, Ethan noted. Want to reach out? Dahlia hesitated. Not electronically. If she's involved, it would tip her off. Then let's go see her in person. Her office is in Oakland. The decision hung between them for a moment before Dahlia nodded. Let me grab my coat. As they drove across the Bay Bridge, rain drumming on. The car roof, Dahlia found herself sharing more of her past, stories she'd never told anyone, about the loneliness of foster care, the survival skills she'd developed, how computers had become her escape and eventually her power. I was angry, she admitted as they navigated Oakland's streets. Technology was the one place where your background didn't matter, only your skill. I could make systems bend to my will when nothing else in my life would. Ethan listened, asking occasional questions but mostly just letting her speak. In the intimate darkness of the car, with rain creating a private cocoon around them, Dahlia felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the relief of being known. Phoenix Rising occupied a renovated warehouse space, its windows still glowing, with light despite the late hour. Vanessa Harlow looked up from her desk with surprise when they were shown in, her silver-streaked dark hair pulled back in a practical bun. "Can I help you?" she asked, studying Dahlia with curiosity but no recognition. "You once helped a girl named Jessa Markham," Dahlia said quietly. 15 years ago at Redwood." Vanessa's expression shifted from confusion to shock as realization dawned. "Jessa?" she whispered, rising slowly from her chair. "My God. Dahlia. Reeves, I never connected." Her eyes filled with wonder. "You did it. Everything I knew you could become." The genuine pride in her former counselor's voice confirmed Dahlia's instinct. Vanessa wasn't behind the threats. "Someone is threatening to expose my past," Dahlia explained. "They have footage from Redwood, knowledge of my history. They're planning to release it tomorrow before my company's biggest product launch." Vanessa's expression darkened. "Sit down," she said, gesturing to chairs. "There's something you should know." She pulled out a tablet, accessing old files. About 6 months ago, Redwood's old digital archives were compromised in a data breach. Juvenile records dating back to 2010 were among the files accessed. "Why wasn't this public knowledge?" Ethan asked. "The breach was contained, and the affected families notified quietly to protect privacy, but—" Vanessa hesitated. There was one person particularly interested in those records, a man who specifically requested information about Jessa Markham, claiming to be researching a book on juvenile rehabilitation success stories. "Who?" Dahlia demanded. "His name was Richard Brennan." Dahlia went still. "Brennan Technology Group's CEO?" she whispered. Ethan leaned forward. "Your main competitor for the Pentagon contract." "He came to me directly," Vanessa continued. "I refuse to share any information, of course. Client confidentiality is absolute. But if he was determined, he could have orchestrated the data breach," Ethan finished. Dahlia's mind raced. Brennan Technology had been Cypher's chief rival for years, always one step behind her innovations. The Pentagon contract for Blackout would effectively shut them out of government cybersecurity for a decade. "He's trying to discredit me before the launch," she concluded. "Create a scandal about my past to make the Pentagon nervous about awarding a classified security contract to a former juvenile offender." "It's desperation," Ethan agreed. "But clever. If the Pentagon pulls out, other clients might follow." Vanessa studied Dahlia intently. "What will you do?" For the first time that day, Dahlia smiled, a sharp, determined expression that transformed her face. "What I've always done. Stay one step ahead." As they left Phoenix Rising, Ethan touched her elbow, gently. "I have an idea," he said, "but it's risky." "I'm listening." "What if we control the narrative? Beat Brennan to the punch?" Dahlia considered this as they returned to the car. "You mean reveal my past myself? Before he can?" "On our terms," Ethan emphasized. "Not as a scandal, but as part of your journey. The brilliant teenage hacker who saw systemic injustice and fought it the only way she knew how, who then channeled that same brilliance into building one of the most secure systems in the world. The Pentagon won't award a classified contract to someone with my background," Dahlia argued. "I think you're wrong," Ethan countered. "Your juvenile record is sealed. You've lived an exemplary life since. And most importantly, who better to build unhackable security than someone who truly understands how hackers think?" The rain had stopped by the time they reached the car, leaving the night air fresh and electric. Dahlia looked at Ethan. Really. Looked at him, seeing not just her loyal CTO, but the man who had stood beside her for 7 years, who had just learned her deepest secret and was still there, still believing in her. "It could destroy everything we've built," she said softly. "Or it could make it stronger," he replied, his eyes never leaving hers. "Brennan wants to use your past as a weapon. Take that power away from him." In that moment, standing in the glistening parking lot with the weight of her past and future hanging in the balance, Dahlia made her decision. She would no longer live in fear of who she had been. It was time for Jessa Markham and Dahlia Reeves to become one whole person. Not a secret to be ashamed of, but a journey to be acknowledged. "Let's get back to the office," she said with newfound resolve. "We have a press statement to write." New protocol. The auditorium at Cipher Technologies buzzed with anticipation. Journalists, tech analysts, and government representatives filled the seats, drawn by rumors of a revolutionary encryption system and, more recently, whispers of a major announcement regarding the company's enigmatic founder. Backstage, Dahlia stood before a mirror, making final adjustments to her appearance. She'd chosen a deep emerald suit that matched her eyes, a deliberate callback to the intensity that had defined Jessa Markham. "Brennan just arrived," Ethan reported, joining her in the green room. "Front row, looking entirely too satisfied with himself." Dahlia smiled thinly. Let him enjoy it while it lasts. Their plan had come together in the early hours of the morning. Rather than simply defending against Brennan's attack, they would transform it into something unexpected. Dahlia had spent the night reaching out to former contacts from her past. People who had known Jessa and could corroborate not just her mistakes, but her growth. "The Pentagon representatives are here too," Ethan continued. "General Wallace and his cybersecurity team." "Good." Dahlia turned from the mirror to face him. "How do I look?" Ethan studied her with a softness in his eyes that made her heart skip. "Like exactly who you're meant to be." A production assistant knocked on the door. "5 minutes, Ms. Reeves." Left alone, Dahlia and Ethan stood in companionable silence. The past 24 hours had shifted something fundamental between them. Boundaries carefully maintained for years had dissolved under the pressure of shared secrets and mutual trust. "Whatever happens out there," Ethan said quietly, "I'm proud to stand beside you. I always have been." Dahlia took his hand, an unprecedented gesture that felt suddenly perfectly natural. "Thank you for seeing me, the real me, all of me." His fingers tightened around hers. "I've always seen you, Dahlia, even when you were trying your hardest not to be seen." The moment stretched between them, heavy with possibility. Then, with reluctance, Dahlia released his hand. "Time to face the music?" The stage lights were blinding as Dahlia approached the podium, cameras flashing and capturing every movement. She spotted Richard Brennan in the front row, his expression smug with anticipated victory. Beside him sat the Pentagon delegation, their faces carefully neutral. "Good morning," she began, her voice steady. "Today was meant to be solely about the future, about Project Blackout and the new standard it sets for data security. But before we reveal that innovation, I want to talk about its origins." A ripple of curiosity moved through the audience. 15 years ago, a teenage girl named Jessa Markham was sentenced to 18 months in juvenile detention for hacking into First Western Financial's servers. What wasn't widely reported was why. Dahlia paused, meeting Brennan's suddenly uncertain gaze directly. She had discovered evidence of predatory lending practices targeting low-income communities, practices that were later confirmed by federal investigations resulting in millions in fines. Murmurs spread through the crowd as journalists began furiously taking notes. "That girl was me." The admission landed like a thunderclap in the silent auditorium. Cameras flashed frantically, After serving my sentence, I was fortunate to have mentors who helped me channel my abilities toward protection rather than intrusion. I changed my name legally to Dahlia Reeves and founded Cipher Technologies with a singular mission: to create systems that couldn't be breached, even by someone like me. On the screens behind her, a slide appeared showing a teenage Jessa alongside present-day Dahlia, a deliberate juxtaposition that acknowledged the connection rather than hiding it. I'm sharing this today because someone recently attempted to use my past as leverage. Her eyes found Brennan's now pale face, thinking that shame would silence me. They were wrong. She gestured, and Ethan joined her on stage, bringing with him 3 former juvenile offenders now employed at Cipher, people Dahlia had quietly mentored over the years. 20% of Cipher's workforce comes from non-traditional backgrounds: former hackers, self-taught programmers from disadvantaged communities, people who understand systems from both sides of the security equation. This diverse perspective is our strength, not our weakness. General Wallace leaned forward in his seat, his interest visibly piqued. And now, Dahlia continued, I'd like to introduce the culmination of that philosophy. Project Blackout isn't just unhackable because it's sophisticated. It's unhackable because it was designed by people who understand exactly how hackers think. The technical presentation that followed was flawless. Dahlia demonstrated Blackout's capabilities with Ethan at her side, their professional synchronicity evident in every seamless transition. When they finished, the audience rose in a standing ovation, led surprisingly by General Wallace himself. As journalists crowded forward with questions, Dahlia noticed Richard Brennan slipping toward the exit, his planned exposé rendered pointless by her preemptive disclosure. The press conference extended well beyond its scheduled time, with questions ranging from technical specifications to Dahlia's personal journey. Through it all, she maintained her composure, answering with a new openness that felt strangely liberating. Hours later, after the last journalist had departed and the Pentagon representatives had scheduled a private meeting to finalize contract details, Dahlia found herself alone with Ethan in her office, watching the sunset paint the city in amber and gold. Brennan's stock dropped 12% this afternoon, Ethan reported, scrolling through news alerts. And Joe Jessa to hero is trending. Dahlia laughed softly. Not exactly how I plan to become a social media sensation. The Pentagon's proceeding with the contract, he continued. General Wallace specifically mentioned being impressed by your transparency and your company's rehabilitation initiatives. She nodded, absorbing this victory quietly. We should expand those programs. There are more Jessas out there. Ethan set down his tablet and moved to stand beside her at the window. So what happens now? Now? Dahlia turned to face him, the setting sun illuminating her copper hair like flame. Now I stop dividing myself into before and after, past and present. Jessa and Dahlia. And us? Ethan asked softly. What happens with us? The question hung between them, charged with 7 years of professional respect, unspoken attraction, and newly forged trust. Dahlia stepped closer, eliminating the careful distance she'd always maintained. I think, she said, her voice low, it's time for a new protocol there, too. Her hand found his, fingers intertwining with deliberate intent. For years, she had convinced herself that vulnerability was weakness, that allowing someone close would only give them power to hurt her. But the past 24 hours had taught her otherwise. True strength lay in being fully known and still valued, still chosen. I'd like that, Ethan murmured, his free hand rising to gently trace the line of her jaw. As the last light of day bathed the city in gold, Dahlia Reeves, once Jessa Markham, always a survivor, closed the final distance between them. In that kiss was a new beginning, not the carefully constructed identity she'd built as protection, nor the angry girl she'd once been, but something authentic and whole, a woman who had finally stopped running from her own shadow. Outside, San Francisco continued its relentless pace. Inside, in the quiet sanctuary of her office, Dahlia had finally come home to herself and to the man who had been waiting patiently for her to arrive.